tardes. Good afternoon. Norman Bristol Colon joined the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development earlier this year and was appointed by Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf to serve as Executive Director of the Governor's 2020 Census Complete Count Commission. There are far-reaching implications if Pennsylvania's population is undercounted in 2020. If the data snapshot does not include all residents, the Commonwealth could lose seats in Congress, receive billions of dollars less in federal funds for a variety of services and programs, and impact data used by the public and private sector. Most recently, Bristol Colon served as the Director of Special Projects for the Pennsylvania Department of State and Special Assistant to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. In this capacity, he served as State Liaison to the National Association of Secretaries of State and was responsible for the state execution of the National Association of Secretaries of State Conference in Philadelphia in July of 2018. He was overseeing the state's coordinated response to Hurricane Maria displaced families in Pennsylvania. Previously, he was appointed by Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell to serve as Executive Director of the Governor's Advisory Commission on Latino Affairs. He was the youngest appointed and longest serving Executive Director in GACLA's history, serving under two governors, Governor Ed Rendell and Governor Tom Corbett. Nationally, Bristol Colon was one of the founders and first elected National Chair of the United States Council on Latino Affairs, an organization formed by nationwide governors, boards, and commissions to advance the status of the more than 55 million Latinos in the United States. He was also elected National Chair of the Interstate Migrant Education Council, the national policy organization advocating for the nation's migrant children and families based in Washington, D.C. At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. Norman Bristol Colon.
Good afternoon. It is such a great pleasure to be here today. And when I grow up, I want to be like almost all of you. Because you are doing such a great job in improving the life of so many individuals that you do not know. And the power of giving and volunteering and the power of humanity is when you are giving something to someone that you don't know, that you know that you're not going to get anything in return. So you are giving it genuinely, with heart, with passion, and with humanity. So on behalf of so many of us that are looking from the outside, the great work that you are doing, and yes indeed, in one of the largest clubs in the world, I congratulate you and I thank you for all the work that you do. Now before I get into the presentation on Puerto Rico, I would like to share with you, few data. I moved to Pennsylvania in 1993 as a young senior in high school, and I attended J.P. McCaskey High School. And I graduated with honor from McCaskey, and I went on to go to the best university in the United States, well, at least to me, Penn State University. So I bleed blue and white. When I went to the university, it was an amazing, amazing opportunity for an individual that was raised by a single mother that came from a very poor barrio in Guayama, the south coast of Puerto Rico. A mom that raised 6 boys by herself, working in the fields of Puerto Rico as a farm worker, spending 16 to 18 hours a day. And then I moved to Pennsylvania with nothing in my pockets. But my pockets were full of hopes and dreams and aspirations. And even though I didn't have any money in my pocket, I had something that was even more profound. And it was about dreaming big. Because when you dream big, you accomplish big, and at the end of the day, dreaming costs you nothing. So I went on to Penn State University, and I went to classrooms and to different meetings with some of the sons and daughters of the best Americans in so many disciplines, the private sector and public sector. And yes, there were some times that I had to make the tough decision of where I was spending my money, whether it was for lunch or dinner that day, or it was for taking my girlfriend to the movies. But at the end of the day, when I received that diploma, it was the leveling of the playing field for me. And I am proud to say that yes, those were my circumstances, but they are not now. Thanks to the generosity of so many individuals in this great state of Pennsylvania. So you should be very proud of your Pennsylvania roots. And Puerto Rico, the experience in Puerto Rico today showed me that I didn't come here by accident, but by the grace of God. Because when Puerto Rico was going through the most difficult time in our history, I knew that my Pennsylvania was a community of caring, loving individuals. And I'm going to share with you some of those numbers so you know what you have been doing for the people of Puerto Rico. The hurricane has been the biggest humanitarian crisis in the island. Puerto Rico has been part of the United States since 1898. We have been U.S. citizens since 1917, over 100 years. We became U.S. citizens even before those from Alaska or Hawaii. And the reason, number one, why Puerto Ricans became U.S. citizens was for two main reasons. First, the United States was becoming what is now the strongest democracy on earth and the biggest economic power. So, giving Puerto Ricans citizenship, there was a World War I coming, and the United States was drafting young Puerto Rican men to go into war. So it was easier, morally, to do the recruiting of young Puerto Ricans to go into the armed forces by granting the U.S. citizenship to those in the island. And the second thing was, we were going into this industrial revolution, and we needed cheap labor, right? And that cheap labor came from Puerto Rico to many places, including Lancaster and York and Gettysburg and the migrant farm workers in so many places. But then that cheap labor was U.S. citizen, that it was easier for them to travel to the United States as citizens of the nation. So that's why the history of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania is more than 100 years old. As a matter of fact, in Penn State we had the first Puerto Rican student, even before Puerto Rico was part of the United States, in 1895. So there's a long history of why Puerto Rico and Pennsylvania have been so good to each other. So we received in Pennsylvania over 3,000 students from Puerto Rico after the hurricane. And Pennsylvania, more than 1,000 individuals and organizations, they provided opportunities for these families when they were moving into the state after the hurricane. We have published a statewide catalog on resources and information for that family moving in. The Pennsylvania Department of Education provided guidance to the more than 500 school districts. The governor of Pennsylvania, when we went to the governor and we asked, we need to do something for those fellow American citizens in the island of Puerto Rico, the governor asked every single state agency to provide whatever support they could to those individuals in the island and those individuals moving in. One of the first National Guard that arrived in helping those in Puerto Rico was the Pennsylvania National Guard. They were there supporting their fellow American citizens. We raised in Pennsylvania more than $500,000, and we donated more than 2 million tons of food and water that was arriving in the island hours after the hurricane. So yes, we need to be very proud, because in Pennsylvania we still have the most caring state in the union. And it was demonstrated in Puerto Rico, and it is demonstrated every day of our life, and especially for the work that you do. Now, let's go to what is happening in the island after the hurricane. If you see the map, the entire island of Puerto Rico was devastated by Hurricane Maria on September 20th of 2017. If you see, Hurricane Maria went to the island from the southeast to the northwest as a Category 4 hurricane. Something that for many individuals would say that if the same hurricane would have hit some Pennsylvania cities like Lancaster or York, the destruction would be exactly or more damaging than what we experienced in Puerto Rico. Because the island, to some extent, the buildings of Puerto Rico have been prepared for hurricanes and hurricanes year after year. So the houses and the homes in Pennsylvania, they are not concrete homes, most of them. So the devastation would be even bigger if it would have happened here. If you see the economic impact of the hurricane in Puerto Rico, it brought the island to the economic situation that it was over 30 years backwards, creating an enormous challenge, not only for the local Puerto Rican government, but also to us in the United States. Because the relationship of the United States, remember, as a territory of the United States, then the United States Congress is responsible for every single decision that is made in the island of Puerto Rico. You know, the Maria magnified the economic recession that was affecting the island since 2015. You remember the big $92 billion debt that have been part of Puerto Rico for the past, almost 100 years. Due in part to some legislation that was created by the U.S. government, and that legislation is called the Jones Act. And for those of you that do not understand the Jones Act, I will put it just simply like this. If you have 10 pharmaceutical companies in the United States that they sell the top pills that are used for medical treatment all over the world, 9 of them are in my hometown of Guayama, Puerto Rico. And 9 of them are, the labor force is creating all these pills for the American public. Yes, once they are made in Puerto Rico, they are shipped to the United States. And then when they send them back to the island, it's 3 or 4 times the price of what you pay in Pennsylvania. That is part of the Jones Act, because it's the mercantile law of the nation. If you see the exodus of Puerto Ricans moving into the United States, it was consistently, since 2006, we have about 49,000 individuals moving from the island to the US, almost every year. But if you look at 2017 and 2018, that figure tripled. And that went on to more than 175,000 individuals leaving the island after the hurricane. That created so many challenges, especially because those that were leaving the island were those that could leave, that could pay, that had the money and the means to move to any of the states of the Union, leaving behind the poor and leaving behind the senior citizens. So a lot of the highly educated Puerto Ricans, they move into Pennsylvania, they move into Orlando, they move into New York. And now we have the figures that more than 3,000 doctors left Puerto Rico, leaving the island in disarray and creating so many challenges, especially for the senior citizen population. If you see the exodus of Puerto Ricans moving into the US, the blue is where they have been moving in, to every single state of the Union. Every single one of them, Puerto Ricans have been moving in, and especially to 3 states, New York, Pennsylvania, and Florida. And Pennsylvania is the number 2 of receiving Puerto Ricans moving in. And I would like to share some figure with you before I conclude. If you see the student enrollment, and I just mentioned to you that we are leaving behind the senior citizen population in the island. We had about 526,000 students in the island in 2007. You see that figure? Less than 400,000 now. So the young minds, the future of Puerto Rico is moving out of the island, creating a lot of challenges. The schools, in 2006, 2007, there were 1,500 schools in the island. Today, they closed. So that number went down to 823 schools, creating another big crisis. Buildings empty. The mines, the young minds on the island living. So creating a lot of challenges to those in Puerto Rico. Over 159,000 Puerto Ricans have relocated to the mainland, and a bunch of them in Florida. And this is the biggest demographic transformation that we are seeing in the Latino community. You know that Florida is associated with the Cuban community when it comes to the Latino community. Well, now the Puerto Rican community of Florida is larger than the Cuban community of Florida. And you know that they moved into the United States when? After Castro came into power. So the demographic transformation of Florida, to some extent, is related now to the crisis that took place in Puerto Rico. In the Orlando metropolitan area alone, there are over 1 million Puerto Ricans in the Orlando metropolitan area. And that creates a lot of movement, both in the public and private sector. According to the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, Puerto Ricans are the largest group of Latinos in the state of Pennsylvania. If you look at cities like York, Lancaster, Allentown, Bethlehem, and Lebanon, the Puerto Rican community is still the largest of the Latino community. And only about 65% of them, Puerto Ricans 25 years or older, have a high school diploma or less. Now, the median household income for Puerto Ricans is $33,201, which is more than $20,000 less of the median income of Pennsylvania families, which tells me that we have a big challenge inside the Puerto Rican Latino community, and that challenge is called poverty. So the biggest issue that we have in the Puerto Rican and Latino community of Pennsylvania is not the immigration issue. It is not the education issue. It is poverty. And in order for us to really improve the social, educational, and economic conditions of that community, we need to address the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is poverty. Now, let me just give you some numbers that are more local to Pennsylvania. And those are the numbers of Latinos in the Commonwealth. When it comes to the year 2020, Latinos are going to reach 1 million individual residents in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. 1 million. When I went to the governor's office, Governor Rendala, as executive director of the Governor's Latino Commission, we had less than 400,000 Latinos in Pennsylvania. And that was in 2003. 2020 is going to be 1 million. Why? Because the Pennsylvania population growth in the past 30 years. Remember that we have some of the best colleges and universities in the Commonwealth. But our young minds are graduating and they want a better, nicer weather. So they are leaving the state. In the same process that we are losing Pennsylvania native that are going into Arizona and Texas and Vegas and many other good places, and California, in the same the last 30 years we have been losing population, but we have been gaining a lot of population that are from the Latino community. So if you look at school districts, like Lancaster, 60% of the student population Latinos. York, about 53-55% of the student population Latinos. Reading, Pennsylvania, 84% of the student population Latinos. There is no accident that in the 222 corridor, which is Bethlehem, Allentown, Reading, Lancaster, Lebanon, and York, you have the biggest demographic transformation that we have in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and it's been, happening for the past 30 years. So let me conclude by saying this. The Latino community is facing a lot of challenges. However, there is something that we have been calling as the 10-point manifesto to improve the social and economic conditions of the Latino community of Pennsylvania. And this 10-point manifesto are data, research, and policy driven. And I'm going to share them with you, and I'm going to leave this with you because I know in the work that you do to improve conditions of the human race, you will find some of these points important to the daily work of the Rotary Club of York or the Rotary Club anywhere in the world. First, it's about increasing the minimum wage. Individuals cannot live without $7.25 an hour. Income equality. If you look at the income of the Latino community, for every dollar that is made by the general population, Latinos make 50 cents. So we need to work on income equality. Integrating history into the curriculum of school district where the Latino community is so large is important. We need to make sure that in places like York and Lancaster and many other cities, that if we are moving ahead, gentrification doesn't displace families that have been there, that are poor, that can afford to live any other place in the county. We need to eradicate Latino poverty. In the strongest nation on earth, we need to make sure that no kid go to bed hungry and that they don't have books in their classrooms, because I think that we are capable of doing that in the United States. We need to increase home ownership. The best definition of the American dream is when you buy your first home and you have a picture of your dog and your wife or your husband in front of that home. So we need to make sure that we are providing the same opportunities to this community. We need to create a driving campaign to change the narrative. There are many of us, and if you watch the news, and I'm going to conclude with this, there are many of us trying to do our very best, following your models, your steps, for all the work that you have been doing. We have so many young Latinos that are going into colleges and universities, not only in Pennsylvania, but to the Ivy Leagues, and they come from your own community here in York. Yet, none of those stories are covered in the media. Only the negative aspect of the community is covered. So if we are going to be in the business of lifting up our fellow human beings, we need to make sure that we create the positive road for this Latino community to really enjoy the fulfillment of that call made by the founding fathers for this great American enterprise, that all men and women are created equal. Thank you. Any questions?
I'll say it loud so everyone can hear. What makes Florida and Pennsylvania such attractive states for people to relocate to?
Well, Pennsylvania, as you well know, is in a very good position economically. We have the unemployment rate is one of the lowest in the nation. So the economic circumstances is one of them. And then when you go to New York, and many Puerto Ricans were moving into New York, but that was in the 1950s. The homes that they could afford in New York back then now are in the multi-million-dollar homes. For a home in Pennsylvania, that is beautiful. The quality of life here is amazing. They would rather move into Pennsylvania than go into any other place. And with Florida, I believe number one is the weather. It's very similar to Puerto Rico. And number two is that the same community of Puerto Ricans that moved to New York, like Jose's family, many years ago, they are moving from New York to Florida. And they, it's like the new immigrant wave. Immigrants will go where they have a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, and that is what is happening with the Puerto Rican community.
To what do you attribute that the wage scale or the income levels, is that different for the Puerto Rican or the Latino community than it is for the average community?
When you look at my city, the city of Lancaster, for example, and the southeast of the city is where the Puerto Rican community has been concentrated. And this has been the case not only the Puerto Rican community. If you follow the Italian moving into Scranton and to the many other immigrants in the past, they move and they concentrate on the same area. Well, in Lancaster, the Puerto Rican community is concentrated in the southeast, which is the poorest area of the county, because low income, housing opportunities, low, the housing, in the city of Lancaster today, you pay $1,500 for an apartment. In that area, you're going to pay $500 for a home. So they are concentrating in that area, and the educational level of those Puerto Ricans is not at the same level as the general public, for example.
Education.
Education. Any other questions?
Right. What is the importance of the 2020 census?
Very good question, especially because I get paid by the governor for doing that work. So thank you for reminding me, and I don't get in trouble when I go back to Harrisburg. So ladies and gentlemen, the census 2020, is coming. And this is the largest peacetime mobilization in our nation. And we need to count everyone in 2020. Why we need to count everyone in 2020, and especially for Pennsylvania? We need to know who's here. But also, we need to get back a return in our investment. We as taxpayers, we provide a lot of money to the federal government, and based on census data, that money comes back to the state. So for Pennsylvania, that means that every year, depending on the census number, we get $27 billion back to the state. That is for roads and bridges and schools and healthcare and Medicaid and Medicare and so many other programs. And in addition to that, for every person that we count in PA, we get $2,093 per person. That is $20,000 for the next 10 years. And we can only do the census once and only one. So if we miss one person today, we will have to wait until 2030 to count them. So it is our civic duty, just like voting, with the only exception that I know that many of us, we get tired of the political movement, right? Because in Pennsylvania, we vote every 6 months. So as Americans, the top two civic duties that we have is voting and the census 2020. And it is important because it has so many implications for Pennsylvania. For example, another example, we have 18 members of Congress representing the state. We're going to lose one seat. So one member of Congress is going to lose his or her job. And if we don't do a complete count in Pennsylvania, that could be 2 seats. Which means that whoever is president of the United States in 2021, we're going to go through the largest infrastructure investment from the federal government to the states. And we need that political representation in Washington, so that money comes to your county, to Lancaster County, and to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so we can provide a better quality of life to our residents. Any other questions?